Behind the opulence of the Forbidden City and those 9 Oscar wins lies a treasure trove of bizarre production secrets. From composers who played enemies on screen to Queen Elizabeth being denied entry to a palace while cameras rolled. Think you know everything about Bernardo Bertolucci's epic? Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about The Last Emperor. Fact 1. The composer played a fascist villain. When Ryuichi Sakamoto signed on to work with director Bernardo Bertolucci on The Last Emperor, he thought he was just there to compose music, but the Italian filmmaker had other plans that would push the Japanese musician far outside his comfort zone. Sakamoto ended up not only creating the Oscar-winning score alongside David Byrne and Kang Soo, but also playing one of the film's most menacing villains, the cold-blooded Japanese officer Masahiko Amakasu. The role required Sakamoto to portray a fanatic fascist, which was particularly challenging since he had previously played a similar character in Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, and wasn't eager to repeat the experience. What makes this situation even more unusual is how Bertolucci prepared his composer-turned-actor for the demanding role. The director noticed that Sakamoto smiled too much in personal conversations and seemed too gentle for the part, so he made a deliberate choice to treat him callously during the early days of filming. Bertolucci began speaking curtly to Sakamoto and acted distant toward him, all in an effort to toughen him up and help him channel the necessary cruelty for the character. This method-acting approach extended to the cast as well, with lead actor John Lone greeting Sakamoto by saying, "You are my enemy," and treating him coldly on set. Despite his reluctance and the uncomfortable preparation process, Sakamoto delivered a chilling performance as the one-armed Japanese officer, creating one of the film's most memorable antagonists, while simultaneously crafting the sweeping musical score that would help the film win 9 Academy Awards in 1988. Fact 2. Bertolucci made future directors cry on set. During the filming of The Last Emperor's Cultural Revolution parade sequence, Bernardo Bertolucci faced an unexpected challenge that led to one of the most emotionally raw moments of the entire production. The director had brought in over 1,000 schoolchildren to play Red Guards marching in the 1967 Cultural Revolution scene, but he quickly realized that none of these young actors had any understanding of the anger and intensity that defined that brutal period in Chinese history. The children simply couldn't capture the right emotion because they had grown up in a completely different era and had no connection to the trauma their parents' generation had experienced. Desperate to find a solution, Bertolucci came up with an unconventional approach that would prove to be both effective and deeply moving. He gathered together 4 or 5 young Chinese film directors he had met during pre-production, including Chen Kaige and Zhang Yimou, who would both go on to become internationally acclaimed filmmakers in their own right. Chen Kaige even had a small acting role in the film as the captain of the Imperial Guard. Bertolucci asked these directors to share their personal memories and experiences of living through the Cultural Revolution, and what happened next was completely spontaneous and unexpected. As the young directors began recounting their stories, they started acting out the emotions they had felt during that traumatic time, and suddenly they were crying and reliving the psychodrama of their youth right there on set. Bertolucci later described it as extraordinary, watching these filmmakers transform before his eyes. Their raw, genuine emotion was exactly what the scene needed, and it successfully motivated the other actors to tap into the intensity required for the parade sequence. Fact 3. Queen Elizabeth was blocked from the Forbidden City in one of the most bizarre diplomatic situations to ever arise from a film production. Queen Elizabeth II found herself unable to visit one of China's most iconic landmarks because a movie shoot took priority over a reigning monarch. The incident occurred while Bernardo Bertolucci and his crew were filming the elaborate coronation scene inside the Forbidden City, which required the massive palace complex to be completely closed off to any visitors or distractions. The timing couldn't have been more awkward, as Queen Elizabeth happened to be in Beijing at exactly the same time on an official state visit to China, and visiting the historic Forbidden City was naturally on her itinerary as one of the most important cultural sites in the country. However, the Chinese authorities had granted Bertolucci unprecedented access to film inside the palace, something no Western production had ever been allowed to do before, and they weren't about to interrupt the historic shoot for anyone, not even the Queen of England. The production was given absolute priority over the royal visit, which meant that while cameras were rolling and thousands of extras in period costumes were filling the courtyards, the British monarch was politely informed that she would not be able to tour the Forbidden City during her stay in Beijing. This decision highlights just how significant the Chinese government considered this film project to be, as they were willing to deny access to one of the world's most prominent heads of state in order to ensure that the filming could proceed without interruption. It's hard to imagine many other circumstances where a movie production would be deemed more important than accommodating a visiting queen. But The Last Emperor was clearly seen as a special cultural moment that deserved absolute protection from any interference. Fact 4. The producer literally used the phone book producer. Jeremy Thomas faced what seemed like an impossible task when he set out to raise $25 million for The Last Emperor completely on his own, without any backing from major Hollywood studios or established financiers. This was an enormous sum of money for an independent production in the mid-1980s, especially for a film that would be shot mostly in China with an international cast and crew. But Thomas was determined to make Bertolucci's vision a reality, no matter what it took. The fundraising process became so challenging and desperate that Thomas resorted to a method that sounds almost unbelievable in the world of high-stakes film financing. At one point during his search for investors, he literally sat down with phone books and started flipping through the pages, looking for names of anyone who might possibly have enough money to contribute to the project. He would cold call these potential financiers out of the blue, essentially making sales pitches to complete strangers in hopes that someone would take a chance on this ambitious epic about the last emperor of China. This grassroots approach to funding a major motion picture was almost unheard of at that level of filmmaking, where producers typically rely on established relationships with studios, banks, and wealthy individuals who are already part of the entertainment industry's inner circle. Despite the seemingly haphazard nature of his fundraising strategy, Thomas somehow managed to piece together the entire budget through sheer persistence and determination, ultimately proving that sometimes the most unconventional methods can lead to extraordinary results. The fact that this phone book approach helped finance a film that would go on to win 9 Academy Awards makes the story even more remarkable and shows just how much passion and creative problem-solving went into getting The Last Emperor made. Fact 5. Perfect Oscar sweep with 0 acting nominations. The Last Emperor achieved one of the most unusual combinations of success and oversight in Academy Awards history when it dominated the 60th Oscar ceremony in 1988. The film won every single award it was nominated for, taking home all 9 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Editing, Best Original Score, Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, and Best Sound. This perfect sweep tied the record previously set by the musical Gigi in 1958, making The Last Emperor only the second film at that time to win every category in which it was nominated. However, what makes this achievement truly bizarre is that despite completely dominating the ceremony and winning the industry's highest honor for Best Picture, not a single member of the cast received a nomination in any of the 4 acting categories. Neither John Lone's portrayal of Emperor Puyi spanning 5 decades of his life, nor Peter O'Toole's performance as the Scottish tutor Reginald Johnston, nor Joan Chen's heartbreaking turn as the opium-addicted empress earned recognition from the Academy voters. This glaring omission made The Last Emperor only the 8th Best Picture winner in Oscar history to achieve the top prize without any acting nominations whatsoever. A rare distinction that highlights how the Academy sometimes focuses entirely on a film's technical achievements and overall impact while completely overlooking the performances that bring the story to life. The situation becomes even more puzzling when you consider that the film's 3-hour runtime gave audiences plenty of opportunity to connect with these characters. Yet somehow, the actors' work failed to register with Oscar voters, even as virtually every other aspect of the production was being celebrated and rewarded with gold statuettes. Fact 6. John Lone was cast at first sight. Finding the right actor to portray Emperor Puyi was one of the most crucial decisions for The Last Emperor, since the role required someone who could convincingly age from a young man of 18 all the way through to his 60s, covering nearly 5 decades of one person's extraordinary life. Bernardo Bertolucci needed an actor with both the physical presence and emotional range to carry this epic story, and he found his leading man through an unexpected recommendation from fellow director Michael Cimino. Cimino had just worked with John Lone on the crime drama Year of the Dragon in 1985, and was so impressed by the Hong Kong-born actor's talent that he immediately thought of him when he heard Bertolucci was looking for someone to play the last emperor of China. Cimino reached out to his longtime friend Bertolucci and strongly urged him to consider Lone for the part, setting up what would become one of the fastest casting decisions in major motion picture history. When Bertolucci traveled to Los Angeles to meet with potential actors during the casting process, he sat down with John Lone for their first meeting, and the decision was made almost instantly. The moment Bertolucci saw Lone in person, he knew without any doubt that this was his emperor, and he cast him on the spot without requiring any auditions or screen tests. This snap judgment was particularly remarkable given the massive responsibility being placed on Lone's shoulders, as he would need to portray Puyi at multiple stages of life and carry the entire 3-hour epic on his performance. To prepare for the demanding role, Lone even traveled to China specifically to study the body language and movements of elderly people, ensuring that his portrayal of the aging emperor would feel authentic and believable across all the different periods of Puyi's tumultuous life. Fact 7. 2 main themes by 2 different composers. The Last Emperor broke with conventional film scoring practices by featuring not just one, but 2 completely separate main themes, each composed by a different musician, which created an unusual but ultimately powerful musical landscape for the film. The Oscar-winning score was a collaboration between 3 composers, Ryuichi Sakamoto, David Byrne, and Kang Soo. But what makes the arrangement particularly fascinating is how Sakamoto and Byrne divided their work in a way that went against every logical expectation. David Byrne, the American musician best known as the frontman of the rock band Talking Heads, composed the film's opening title theme that plays over the stylish opening credits, and his music was deeply rooted in traditional Chinese classical music, featuring authentic instruments like the erhu, a 2-stringed fiddle that creates that distinctive high, haunting sound associated with Chinese culture. His main theme emerged from evocative Chinese percussion and was steeped in the musical traditions of Imperial China, which seems like an odd choice for a Western rock musician with no cultural connection to Asia. Meanwhile, Ryuichi Sakamoto, the Japanese composer and former member of the electronic group Yellow Magic Orchestra, took the opposite approach by creating themes that were heavily influenced by Western classical music, featuring grand orchestral arrangements with strings and piano that could have easily fit into any European historical epic. This counterintuitive division of labor, where the Western composer wrote the Eastern-sounding music and the Eastern composer wrote the Western-sounding music, somehow worked brilliantly and contributed to the film's unique sonic identity. Sakamoto himself later noted this interesting reversal, pointing out that Byrne had written the non-Western-sounding themes while he had focused on the Western musical elements, creating a cultural exchange that mirrored the film's exploration of East meeting West. Fact 8. The director's cut is actually fake. For over a decade, film enthusiasts and collectors believed they were watching Bernardo Bertolucci's true vision for The Last Emperor when they purchased or rented a version labeled as the director's cut that ran 3 hours and 38 minutes. But this widely accepted belief turned out to be completely wrong. The extended version, which contains 218 minutes of footage, compared to the theatrical release's 163 minutes, was released in the United States in 1998 and quickly became known as the definitive way to experience the film, with many fans and critics praising the additional scenes and character development that the extra 55 minutes provided. However, when the Criterion Collection began preparing their special edition DVD and Blu-ray release in 2008, They worked directly with Bertolucci and cinematographer Vittorio Storaro to create the definitive version of the film, and that's when the truth finally came out. Both Bertolucci and Storaro made it explicitly clear during the restoration process that the shorter theatrical version was without any doubt the real director's cut, the version that represented their artistic vision for how the film should be seen. The longer version that had been mistakenly marketed as the director's cut for years was actually never intended to be the definitive version at all, but was instead an early rough cut that had been specifically created to air as a 4-part television miniseries on Italian television, since the theatrical version was deemed too long for a single 3-hour television block, but too short to effectively spread across 2 nights of programming. This revelation meant that countless viewers had been watching what was essentially a television adaptation rather than the filmmaker's preferred version, and the mislabeling had persisted for an entire decade before being corrected. Fact 9. Real Puyi's brother worked as advisor. In an extraordinary connection between the film and actual history, the production team had access to someone who had lived through the events being depicted on screen, as Puyi's real-life younger brother Pucci served as a historical advisor during the making of The Last Emperor. Pucci was 7 years younger than his brother and had spent his own childhood within the walls of the Forbidden City, serving as the young emperor's companion and playmate during those isolated years when Puyi ruled over a kingdom that existed only within the palace grounds. Having this direct link to the historical events gave the filmmakers an invaluable resource for understanding the intimate details of daily life in the imperial court, from the smallest customs and rituals to the complex emotional dynamics between family members who were separated by both royal protocol and the extraordinary circumstances of their upbringing. What makes Pucci's involvement even more remarkable is that he was literally consulting on scenes that depicted his own childhood experiences, watching actors recreate moments from his past and providing guidance on how things actually looked, sounded, and felt during those years. He could correct inaccuracies in the sets, costumes, and behaviors, offering insights that no amount of research in books or archives could ever provide, because he had been there himself as a young boy navigating the strange world of the Forbidden City alongside his brother. The film shows several scenes of the two brothers together, including moments where the young Pucci arrives at the palace and struggles to understand the bizarre rules and hierarchies of imperial life, and having the real Pucci available to ensure these scenes rang true added a layer of authenticity that few historical films can ever achieve. Fact 10. 4 different actors played the same character. Telling the life story of Emperor Puyi from early childhood through old age presented a unique casting challenge that required Bernardo Bertolucci to find not just one actor, but 4 completely different performers who could each embody the character at distinct stages of his life. The film spans nearly 6 decades of Chinese history and follows Puyi from the moment he becomes emperor as a confused toddler all the way through his final years as an elderly man working as a simple gardener in communist China, which meant that no single actor could possibly portray the character across such a vast age range. Richard Vu played the 3-year-old Puyi, who is torn from his family and brought to the Forbidden City for his coronation ceremony, capturing the terror and confusion of a small child thrust into an incomprehensible world of ritual and ceremony. Zhu Tiger took over the role when Puyi reached 8 years old, depicting the young emperor as he begins to understand the strange prison of luxury he inhabits and struggles with the loneliness of his isolated existence. Tao Wu portrayed the 15-year-old Puyi during the crucial period when his Scottish tutor Reginald Johnston arrives and begins opening his eyes to the world beyond the palace walls, showing the teenager's growing awareness and desire for freedom. Finally, John Lone carried the bulk of the film as the adult Puyi, playing him from age 18 through his 60s and showing his transformation from an arrogant puppet emperor to a humbled citizen. What makes this multiple casting approach so impressive is how smoothly these transitions happen throughout the film's complex narrative structure, which jumps back and forth through time rather than following a strict chronological order. Yet the shifts between actors feel so natural and organic that many viewers watching the film don't even consciously register that they're seeing 4 different performers. Fact 11. Bertolucci wrote songs with anachronistic dates. Despite the meticulous attention to historical detail that went into recreating the Forbidden City and the costumes and customs of Imperial China, The Last Emperor contains several noticeable musical anachronisms that place popular American songs in scenes set years before those songs were actually written. The most prominent example occurs in a scene set in 1927, when the adult Puyi, now living as a wealthy playboy in the Japanese-controlled area of Tianjin and going by the westernized name Henry, performs the song Am I Blue as part of his decadent lifestyle of parties and entertainment. The problem is that this particular song wasn't actually composed until 1929, a full 2 years after the scene supposedly takes place, making it impossible for Puyi to have been singing it at that point in his life. The extended television version of the film, which ran over 3.5 hours, contained an even more glaring musical mistake that was later caught and corrected. In that longer cut, there's a scene set in 1924 where Puyi's consorts are shown dancing to a violin playing Old Man River, the famous song from the musical Showboat, but Showboat didn't actually premiere on Broadway until 1927. Meaning that particular piece of music wouldn't have existed yet during the time period being depicted. These kinds of anachronisms are relatively common in historical films, especially when filmmakers choose songs that capture the right mood or feeling of a scene, even if the timeline doesn't quite match up perfectly. And most viewers watching The Last Emperor probably didn't catch these discrepancies unless they happened to be familiar with the exact publication dates of early 20th century American popular music. Fact 12. The Japanese distributor censored the rape of Nanking. When The Last Emperor was being prepared for release in Japan, the film became caught up in a controversial censorship incident that sparked international outrage and highlighted the ongoing sensitivities surrounding one of World War II's most horrific atrocities. The Shochiku Fuji Company, which had acquired the distribution rights for Japanese theaters, made the decision to edit out a 30-second sequence that depicted the rape of Nanking, a brutal massacre that occurred in 1937 when Japanese forces invaded the Chinese city and committed widespread atrocities against civilians. The distributor removed this brief but significant scene without obtaining permission or even informing Bernardo Bertolucci that they were altering his film, apparently believing that Japanese audiences would find the historical reference too sensational or uncomfortable to watch. When Bertolucci discovered what had been done to his work, he was absolutely furious at this unauthorized interference with his artistic vision and publicly condemned the censorship in the strongest possible terms, calling the company's actions revolting and making it clear that he had never given consent for any cuts to be made to the film. The controversy quickly attracted media attention and sparked heated debates about historical responsibility and the importance of acknowledging difficult chapters of national history rather than pretending they never happened. Facing mounting criticism and negative publicity from both international film communities and historians, the Shochiku Fuji Company was forced to backtrack on their decision and hastily restored the deleted sequence to the prints being shown in Japanese cinemas. In their public statement attempting to explain the situation, company representatives blamed confusion and misunderstanding for the edit, while simultaneously claiming that they believed the rape of Nanking scene was too sensational for moviegoers, a justification that satisfied virtually nobody involved in the dispute. Fact 13. 19,000 extras came from the Chinese army. The scale of The Last Emperor's production was truly staggering, requiring a total of 19,000 extras throughout the course of filming to populate the massive crowd scenes that brought Imperial China to life on screen. This enormous number of background performers was necessary to create the sense of grandeur and spectacle that the story demanded, particularly for sequences like the elaborate coronation ceremony, where thousands of eunuchs and palace officials needed to fill the vast courtyards of the Forbidden City, all dressed in authentic period costumes and performing the intricate rituals of the Qing dynasty. finding and coordinating that many people would have been virtually impossible through normal casting channels. So the Chinese government stepped in with an unprecedented solution by providing members of the People's Liberation Army to serve as extras whenever large crowds were needed for particular scenes. This level of military support for a foreign film production was completely unheard of in China at that time, and it demonstrated just how seriously the Chinese authorities took this project and how committed they were to ensuring its success. The use of Army personnel as extras offered several practical advantages beyond just having access to large numbers of disciplined people who could follow directions and maintain formations during long shooting days. The soldiers were already accustomed to taking orders, standing in precise positions, and executing coordinated movements, which made them ideal for the kinds of ceremonial scenes that required hundreds or thousands of people to move in perfect synchronization. Additionally, the logistical infrastructure of the military made it much easier to transport, house, and feed such massive groups of people during the 16 weeks of shooting that took place across various locations in China, including Beijing, Manchuria, and the Liaodong Peninsula. Fact 14. All Chinese characters speak English. One of the most unusual and controversial decisions Bernardo Bertolucci made while crafting The Last Emperor was the choice to have all the Chinese characters speak English throughout the entire film. Even though the story takes place in China and revolves around Chinese historical figures who would have naturally been speaking Mandarin or other Chinese dialects in their daily lives. This linguistic choice was made primarily to ensure that Western audiences, particularly in North America and Europe, could easily follow the complex story without needing to read subtitles for nearly 3 hours, as the filmmakers worried that subtitle fatigue might prevent viewers from fully engaging with the epic's emotional depth and visual splendor. What makes this decision even stranger is that the Japanese characters in the film, including the military officers and officials who appeared during the Manchukuo sections of the story, are actually allowed to speak Japanese and are subtitled when they do so, creating an inconsistent approach to language that some critics found jarring and confusing. The decision to prioritize English for the Chinese characters had significant consequences for the performances, as many of the Asian actors in the cast were not native English speakers and struggled to deliver their lines with the same emotional nuance and natural rhythm they could have achieved in their own language. This linguistic barrier was noticeable in certain scenes where the dialogue feels somewhat stiff or awkward, and it likely contributed to the fact that despite the film's 9 Oscar wins, not a single actor received a nomination from the Academy. The choice essentially asked Chinese and Chinese-American performers to portray their own cultural heritage while speaking in a foreign tongue, which created an extra layer of difficulty that actors like John Lone and Joan Chen had to overcome in order to bring authenticity to their characters. Fact 15. A 60-year-old cricket survived on set. The Last Emperor ends with one of cinema's most poignant and quietly powerful scenes built around a tiny cricket cage that serves as a physical link between the elderly Puyi's present and his distant childhood as the Emperor of China. In the final sequence of the film, set in 1987, an aged Puyi returns to visit the Forbidden City as a tourist, now just an ordinary citizen among the crowds exploring what was once his home and prison. When he approaches the Dragon Throne where he sat as a child emperor, he reaches behind it and discovers a small ornate cricket cage that has somehow remained hidden and undisturbed for 6 decades, containing the pet cricket that was given to him by palace official Chen Baochen on his coronation day back in 1908. The film presents this discovery as though the cricket has impossibly survived all those years, waiting in the darkness behind the throne through revolutions, wars, and the complete transformation of Chinese society. Puyi then gives this precious object to a young boy who is visiting the palace, creating a bridge between generations and symbolizing the passing of memory and history from the old China to the new. Of course, in reality, crickets only live for a few months at most, so the idea of a 60-year-old cricket is a beautiful fantasy rather than a biological possibility, but that's precisely what makes the moment so emotionally resonant. The cricket cage becomes a symbol for the persistence of memory, identity, and personal history, even as everything else changes around us, representing all the small pieces of ourselves that somehow survive intact through decades of upheaval and transformation. This simple prop carries enormous emotional weight in the film's closing moments, encapsulating the entire journey of a man trying to hold on to his sense of self.